E aí, galera, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um Developers pelo Mundo. E hoje, como de costume, nós estamos com um convidado super especial de outro lado do mundo. Hoje o papo vai ser em inglês, mas não se preocupem que depois a gente vai legendar para ficar mais fácil, mais acessível a todo mundo. Antes da gente começar, comenta aqui no nosso chat para a gente entender se está dando para ouvir legalzinho, se o canal tá ok. Como de costume, nós vamos fazer essa talk durante 1 hora. Nós vamos fazer as perguntas direto para o nosso convidado. E você pode perguntar aqui no chat, que a gente vai fazendo essas perguntas para ele. Lembrando que a gente já tem um script, então, dependendo do tempo, né, a gente vai se manter a 1 hora, mas se der tempo, a gente vai incluindo outras questões também. Então, lembrando que pode ser questões técnicas, questões sobre carreira e tudo mais. Então, beleza, vamos já esperar só mais um pouquinho o pessoal chegar. Opa, não tem som. Deixa eu ver se tá faltando alguma coisa. Bom, aqui do nosso lado tá ok. Boa. Então, bora nessa, né? Então, vou agora fazer o switch, né? Agora vocês vão ver arranhando um pouquinho em inglês. Para quem é novo no canal, cara, tem bastante entrevistas que a gente está fazendo, então vocês podem se inscrever aqui no canal, já dá o like no vídeo, compartilha com os amigos também, porque hoje a gente tem um convidado especial. So, today we have Yan from Netherlands. He's a huge reference in AWS applications, serverless applications. I've been learning a lot with this guy, actually with his Medium and actually a lot of content and talks. And let's get to know these amazing guys. So welcome to Yan Cui.
Hey man, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. So let's get started all this. Tell us a little bit, who are you? What are you doing there? What's your recent projects?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Yan Cui. So I've been working with I guess AWS for over 10 years now. And I've been working in the software industry for close to 15, I guess, at this point. Nowadays, I work as an independent consultant, mostly. I spend most of my time working with clients, helping them go faster for less using serverless, which I think is a really amazing technology that can let you do a lot of things very efficiently. I mean, I was able to build the backend for a new social network for a client in a couple of weeks, whereas in the past I've had spent months configuring servers and setting up load balancers and all of that. Nowadays it's all done for me, so I can focus on doing the things that actually matters to my customers. So yeah, it's pretty great. In terms of recent projects, the social network is one of them, and also work with a few other customers, building some projects for them as well, including a medical care app for US client that's HIPAA compliant and all of that. So there's a lot of compliance, audit, and things like that that's involved, which is different to what I'm used to. I spent most of my career working in the games, first in the Facebook games when that was hot, and then everyone left Facebook to go mobile, so we built mobile games instead. So yeah, as a developer, I probably worked in mobile in games for probably the most part of my career. So that's been really fun. But nowadays I work for myself as an independent consultant, which is also a lot of fun, where I don't have to work 9 to 5. It's a much more, I have a lot more control over what I work on, how much I work. So it's nice.
Great. Yeah, I've been falling in love with serverless applications right here too, like spending less time building like configuring servers or actually monitoring and observing, installing a lot of stuff. So it saves a lot of time and actually saves a lot of money too.
Yeah.
So as I usually ask, what time is it there? In what country are you living in?
Yeah, so I'm living in the Netherlands. Here is just past 9 o'clock in the evening.
Great. You said you lived in London before, and then you just moved to Netherlands?
That's right. I live in London for over 20 years, but moved to Netherlands last July. Been here for, I guess, over a year now.
Great. Yeah. So I'm really curious about your career with serverless applications, because I know there's a lot of myths and stories about this. But before we go deep in some of these stories, how did you start working in serverless architectures?
Sure. So I guess it was reInvent 2014 when it was announced. And after that, as I typically do, I try out the new services. But in 2014, you couldn't really do too much with Lambda. It was designed to run the S3 image processing. That's it. But then in 2015, they added support for API gateway. It was added support for Kinesis, and then later on, end of 2015, they added support for API gateway. So I probably I guess I did some small stuff with Lambda in 2015, and then 2016, when there's API gateway, when there's a lot better support around actually building a full application around serverless. With Lambda, I actually worked for a social network at the time. We migrated the social network to run pretty much entirely on serverless, and in the process, we cut our spending by about 95%, and also we went from taking a few months to implement a new feature to sometimes a few days, sometimes a few hours, because you can just do things so much quicker.
Great. So, yeah. But talking about the cost, you think that the cost was worth in comparison to the previous approach?
Yeah, the actual cost, the big cost is not in AWS bill. I mean, we did save a lot of money on AWS, compared to what we spent on EC2. We probably made a 90% saving, because it was a social network. It was early stage, but we had some influencers from also Instagram and things like that. So there's very spiky traffic. You will have 100x spikes in traffic, which means if you're running servers, you have to leave a lot of spare capacity sitting around, just so that when an influencer goes, does something, posts something, everyone comes in at the same time. But when you're running Lambda, you don't pay for capacity when you're not using them, which means we saved a lot of our sort of hosting cost. But that you're still talking about a couple of thousands pounds or dollars a month. It's not massively high scale system, but we save the biggest cost is probably on people and the engineering time. We towards the end, we basically got rid of a whole team of contractors who was doing DevOps for us, because there's just not a lot of operational overhead. The backend team, the application or feature engineers could do everything. We don't need a whole team of people to look after all of that for us. So the saving on the people, on the staffing, was easily 3-4 times the saving on AWS. And also, not to mention the fact that we're getting features done in a couple of days compared to a few weeks or a few months. So there's a massive product cost in terms of getting feature delivery, getting engagement, getting a better user experience, because we can actually ship features that's going to scale. It's not going to crash the moment there's a spike of traffic coming in. Those are much more important in terms of cost compared to what you can measure on AWS. And that's one of the problems people often don't realize when they look at the cost, and they think, well, it's probably going to be just as expensive or maybe even more expensive to run on Lambda compared to just running an EC2. But then when you're building a real system for production, you never run just one container. You always run multi-AZ, maybe multi-region. So, straight away, you're looking at least maybe 6 or 9 containers. So, if you just want basic redundancy, that when a server dies, your app is not just dead. And plus the time and energy that you put into managing, configuring all of that, those are expensive costs, because engineers are much more expensive than AWS bills for most companies. But yeah. So what was the question?
Yeah, no, this is, I actually feel the whole question.
Great.
So actually, I was wondering, like you had like real time communication, maybe some WebSocket in some place, and it leads to other question. Do you think there is any scenario that we wouldn't use serverless applications to do it? So
Yeah, so I mean, Lambda still has a lot of service limits. Some of the big ones that people run into are things like the 15 minutes execute invocation time. So there's a lot of big ETL jobs, or if you need to do like a big machine learning thing, and you can't parallelize them, so you need to run essentially a big server for, I don't know, 3 days. You can't really run that on Lambda.
Sure.
There's also cases where, for example, one of the things I built in my previous job was one of my previous jobs was the real-time multiplayer mobile game. So that requires you having a server sitting there receiving 20 requests per second per client. So things like that, it just doesn't work. It doesn't really work with Lambda, where you need to have a persistent server handling a lot of logic. And there's also cases where it just be too expensive to run things on Lambda. So if you have one API, it's maybe something very simple, but you're dealing 100,000 requests per second. You really wouldn't want to pay for Lambda for that. So there's also use cases where Lambda may be too expensive, where you can use Lambda for everything else, but for this API, I'm going to run containers. But otherwise, in most cases, you can use a Lambda for most use cases.
Great. I've been using Fargate to schedule like containers when I had to do like long running processing. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's awkward because we are like, oh, it's fast, right? Or just easy to deploy. But if you don't take care of this kind of like cost and time, it will be a really surprise at the end of the month.
And
Yeah.
also with networking in the AWS, trying to debug problems that's related to networking is just so difficult. It's very complicated. All the different places where you can change rules and whatnot, So whenever you're dealing with containers, there's the whole security side of things is also very difficult as well. People don't look at the container container security maybe as much as they should. Things like the images you depend on, do you know whether or not they've got any vulnerabilities, and you have all these attacks around the operating system itself that you have to patch, and all of that still becomes your job. And not to mention the whole setting up auto balance, auto scaling, load balancing, and all of that. There's a lot of complexities involved. It's not just a case of let's run a container in the cloud, because you never need one. You always need hundreds.
Sure. Even though you have security and you have to avoid a lot of like container in trying to exploit all of other container, it's as long as you go deep, it's even harder.
Yep.
So what is your opinion? Like in your opinion, what is the hardest point of like managing or building serverless apps?
I think once you understand the serverless paradigm, and you are familiar with the ecosystem, the tools that's available, it's actually there's nothing really like particularly hard. What is hard, I find, is getting people to change their mindset about how they build software. There's a lot of people that still ask me, okay, well, that's fine. You got code that can auto scale in the cloud, but I want to run everything on my machine. I know. Okay, I want to simulate DynamoDB. I want to simulate SNS, which there are tools that can let you do that to a degree, but they are very flaky. It takes a long time to set up, and that they break easily. So if you can let go of some of how you're used to building software, and just accept serverless paradigm for all the things it brings you and all the limitations it has, and try to change the way you work to make it less painful for yourself, then building with serverless is actually really easy.
Sure. Nice. So actually, for those who don't know, actually, I know Ian from his Medium posts, and actually I was studying a lot of serverless, and actually, oh, what is VPC? Oh, Ian talking something about VPC, performance, and a lot of stuff. And actually, I've seen you talking about a lot of AWS, but have you ever worked in any other clouds?
I've used a few other services, not so much building an entire application on any of the cloud providers. For example, I've used Google BigQuery for many years. Really big fan of a service. I still kind of prefer it over Athena. Athena's got its nice things about it, but Google BigQuery, I think, from a developer experience point of view, is still just nicer. But other than that, I've tried a few services on Azure as well, but I've not built entire application on the other cloud providers.
Mm-hmm. Great. Oh, we have a lot of comments, both in Portuguese and both in English. It's nice. If you are watching, if you wanna comment there in Portuguese and you're not sure, don't worry, just put there and we try to understand here to ask Ian. Let's use his time. So we have some polemic question right here. Do you think we could replace all Kubernetes applications to serverless applications?
Not all of them. As I mentioned, there's still use cases where you do want to run maybe some kind of containerized environment. I don't think that should be Kubernetes by default. I think Kubernetes is very complex. And in a lot of cases, maybe you do need containers, but maybe you don't need Kubernetes. So for example, on AWS, there's ECS, which I think is a lot easier to use compared to Kubernetes. But that said, there's a lot of companies that would need something like Kubernetes because they're running really complex workloads that you want to optimize for placement of containers within the resources to get the best utilization of the resources that you have. And that's where Kubernetes and all these schedulers really gives you a lot of power. But you're talking about very small subset of companies, very, very large companies, but very small subset of companies that need to have that. I mean, Google, Amazon, all these big tech giants, they would definitely, be running containers, everything on containers. Sure. Maybe not Kubernetes itself, but for most people, you shouldn't be looking at Kubernetes as your first choice. I mean, if you're selling a product, you're selling a service, focus on the thing that actually matters, which is what serverless allows you to do. Whereas Kubernetes it's going to take a lot of your time on building infrastructure, and you're not an infrastructure company. Unless you are an infrastructure company, infrastructure is overhead. So if you're like a company that provides some kind of cloud, then sure, run containers. But if you're a product company, you're selling a product or service, then maybe not.
Great. So you said you built like a social network, a social media network, and actually it looks like something hard to measure about the cost. And a lot of customers right here are trying to move to this kind of architecture because they think it's the infrastructure would be less expensive, like cheaper actually. And but for you, how do you measure the cost of your applications?
Well, the first thing you got to understand is what's your traffic pattern. I mean, Lambda is going to be a lot cheaper compared to running containers. When you've got 10 requests per second, because it's going to be a lot more expensive when you're running 10,000 requests per second. So understanding your traffic requirement is going to be important, and also understanding the different services you use. There are lots of different ways you can make cost mistakes, like fanning out messages, or if you've got a high throughput API, using API gateway instead of ALB can be expensive. I mean, if you're looking at an API that does 1,000 requests per second, API gateway is going to cost you about $9,000 a month. But if you use ALB, that's going to be about $200. The Lambda cost is going to be, whatever, but API gateway can be really expensive if you use it on really high throughput systems. But you can use ALB with Lambda as well. So there are also often cheaper alternatives that you can use.
Great. So actually, nothing is just silver bulletproof, I think.
No,
So
as I
nice.
mentioned, if you got the system that's got some part of it is high throughput and you need to worry about cost, then run those in containers. So that's why I often talk about people talk about serverless first, not serverless only. So you start with serverless, maybe as you start a new service or product, and then when it gets really expensive, then move that into containers. But
Great.
start with serverless. Don't start with running Kubernetes and spend 12 months building up your infrastructure so that you can run one line of code in production.
For sure. No, I remember I had a mistake in when I was trying to like build the whole infrastructure, and I just forget to resize the disk and actually to put some like dynamic disk. And after 2 days, I just received a lot of like alerts, like, oh, the disk is empty, and I had to stop the whole infrastructure to change my disk because it wasn't like straightforward to change. It caused a lot of headaches for me, but it was like I learned to the bad way. So I'm going to invite the first guest to talk with us. He has a very good question to you. So welcome to Wellington. So Wellington.
Hi everyone, hi Yan, hi Eric.
Hey man.
So as you can see right here, my name is Wellington, and I am a TypeScript full stack developer. So I mainly work with Node.js and React.js. And Yan, today I'm here to ask you about about the well-known cold start on our several applications and lambdas in general. I've seen a significant decrease in the startup time, but it's still right there. So do you think that we're going to see a time in the future when this cold start could be nearly non-existent and serverless applications are going to take over the world or something like that?
I don't know if you're gonna ever be non-existent. So right now you could get rid of cold starts if you use a provision concurrency. But provision concurrency has got additional complexities. So for those of you who are not familiar, provision concurrency is basically a way for you to tell AWS to say, I know I'm going to need at least 10 containers running or 10 instances of this function running all the time. So I'm going to pay you a uptime for having that 10 containers running all the time. So I don't see cold starts. So there are ways for you to get away from that, but it's not something that you should be using all the time. And the first thing I would say about cold start is that, again, start with your requirements. When you talk about cold start, you're talking about sporadic spikes in latency, which is not new with serverless. We've had that for as long as I can remember, because servers got garbage collector. When they runs, it stops the world and you get a spike in latency. And also, when you got servers that are overwhelmed, you have a spike in latency. In fact, those spikes are much more prevalent because when they happen, it's not just that, it's all the way up. Because the CPU gets saturated, network gets saturated, response time goes from 100 milliseconds to 5, 10, 20 seconds. And that happens all the time. So like this sudden spike in latency is not new, but with Lambda, it's a systemic thing that happens because of how the system works. With cold starts, when it comes to Node.js functions and Python and Golang functions, you can do very small amount of optimization and bring the cold start down to maybe about 300 to 500 milliseconds. For most web applications, that is good enough as a 99 percentile. So a lot of web applications, you have your 99 percentile latency SLA would be, say, 1 second or 3 seconds as your response time, as your target. And that's okay, that's good enough. But if you got like a Java, .NET, or other runtime that are heavier, then maybe that's a problem. And also when you've got, say, a microservices environment where it's, if one function cold starts is 300 milliseconds, and that's okay. But when you got one function calling another, and they all cold start, then it's bad. So for those cases, that's where you would use something like provision concurrency to pay extra or pay for uptime and not just usage for those Lambda functions and the containers. So there are ways for you to get around it today. I think they will continue to improve, but I don't think you ever get to the point where it's zero. It's very difficult to do that, and while still give you the ability to scale on dynamically, and also make sure that everyone is not having a fair share, fair use of the resources that AWS manages and lets customers scale the containers. Well,
That's really nice. I didn't know that.
it was announced in the last re:Invent.
Yeah, it's like what we have and the new purpose of the serverless altogether. It's mind blowing. I didn't expect that something like that.
Oh, it's different from the whole pay-per-use philosophy of Lambda. I think we have to be practical. It's no good saying that Lambda is pay-per-use, is never paying for uptime. But people run into real problems and need real solutions. I don't care if it's serverless or not. I care about the benefit that serverless gives me, which is the ability to build applications and focus on the things that matter and not on infrastructure. I don't care if it's called serverless. I don't care if I have to, call it something else. What I want is the ability to focus on the business critical part of my application. And I'm really happy with things like a Fargate, which gives you almost serverless containers, but it's not as good as Google's Cloud Run, which also give you the triggers for the events. Fargate makes it easier for you to run containers on ECS, but it's not it doesn't have that event-driven side of Lambda.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer.
So else, stay there. We have other questions.
I'll come back later.
Yeah, come back. Yeah. So, have you used? Actually, I've seen some posts about you using serverless framework. Do you still use it, or you prefer other frameworks right now?
It's still my preferred choice. I have done projects with SAM. I haven't done much with CDK. Server framework is still my preferred choice. Yes.
Great, but yeah, for me too. I've tried some on Amplify as well. It's actually super nice, but I was a little bit confusing.
I think with Amplify is great for front-end focused team that doesn't know too much about AWS to get something quickly up and running. But you will most likely run into problems if you don't understand what your tool is doing for you. Even when using things like server framework, make sure you understand how server framework is provisioning CloudFormation resources. And with Amplify, it hides a bit too much for you. At least that's my feeling. And I've heard a lot of people run into problems with Amplify, whereby they try to make a change and deploy, and they can't because you are still bound by CloudFormation rules. There are still changes that it can't update. You can't update a schema for a DB table, for example. I've heard people get stuck and have to delete the stack and start from scratch, which in production is not an option, right?
Jesus.
So Amplify is very useful for prototyping, I think, especially for front-end focused teams. But personally, I don't use Amplify for that. I use the Amplify JS library for the front end itself, but not for I don't use the Amplify CLI.
Yeah. I mean, libraries coming around a lot of time. It's hard to, So we have some, actually it's a scenario because a lot of people here are thinking to move the monolith. So they have like on EC2 or just an API. And we have a lot of approach just changing like the middleware and expose then a serverless API. Do you think this is a good approach, or is better like to rewrite actually the whole layer and just put there?
I think it depends. I mean, eventually you probably should rewrite to make your application, native to serverless. I make it idiomatic for as an idiomatic serverless application. But if you're talking about, that's going to take you 6 months to move move things into Lambda. And have to do that over multiple iterations using strangler patterns. that is probably not realistic for a lot of people. So I love the fact that you can take an Express app and then put into a Lambda function using middleware. I think that is a great way for you to get some benefits. So, for example, if you're a team and you're struggling with all the DevOps side of things, of running containers and setting up load balancers, auto scaling, making sure you got actual redundancies, then I think that's a good option. You're making some sacrifices in terms of performance and latency for cold starts, but at the same time, you've just got yourself a very scalable infrastructure that has got built-in redundancy. Lambda functions are deployed to 3 availability zones by default. So for you to actually build that yourself and to pay for them when you don't need them, it's not very efficient. So you can get a lot of benefits by doing that, but if you want to get the most performance, the most security from Lambda, you should eventually rewrite your application. But it's easier once you are running on Lambda already to then refactor rather than try to do big bang or do over the course of 12 months strangle a pattern to move things gradually.
Great. Yeah. I mean, this is something super appeared often here. People was like, "Oh, we should move." I was like, "Man, I'm not sure because it depends how you know about the application and yeah." Anyway, I've seen you have like me experiencing the Microsoft Word, working with C# and F#. Talking about performance today, what do you think is better for several applications?
Depends. I mean, specifically for serverless or in general?
For serverless, actually, context.
Yeah, I think for serverless, what we see is that most functions are very I/O heavy. So it almost makes no difference what language you use. One of the benefits that you use to get from one language over to another is that a lot of the web framework, for example, there's all these benchmarks on how many requests per second you can run on a web framework because of how much overhead it takes and things like that. But when it comes to serverless, it doesn't matter anymore because the concurrency is in the platform, is not in your code. Your code handles one API request at a time. It doesn't matter how fast it does it. It's got all the CPU it's going to need. So performance-wise, I say almost no difference unless you're talking about you're doing like machine learning, you're doing something that's very computationally expensive. Then maybe things like Go, things like Rust, things like that compiled to native code would have got better performance compared to something like Node or Python.
Nice. I would change a little bit this question. So, what language do you like most?
F#. F# is still my favorite language. But I don't like it anymore. I write mostly Node.js nowadays.
Oh, great. I will invite again Wellington because he has a very good question about F# as well.
Okay.
Hi everyone again. I'm back. And I, as Eric, have seen that you are a great enthusiast of F# as well. That's a language known by working with functional programming, imperative programming, and of course the object-oriented as well. And I would like to know which one of these paradigms do you prefer working with nowadays? Combining them, if you see some advantages in working with different paradigms sometimes, and something like that.
Yeah, so I like to do, well, personally, my preference from the ideological point of view is functional programming. But when I was programming mostly with F#, I would use functional with OO because the two are orthogonal. They're not opposite. Functional is opposite to imperative, where it's all about mutating state and all that, which as the application becomes more complex, it's harder and harder for you to understand why did the state for this attribute change, where did that change happen, right? Whereas with functional, there's a lot of constructs that help you manage side effects. However, When it comes to Lambda, I also think it doesn't matter as much anymore. And it really hurts me to say that because I'm a massive fan of functional and a massive fan of F#. What I found is that F# gives me, and functional paradigm gives me a lot of tools to manage complexity. And that was important because I was building complex applications, which, an application can have so many different abstraction layers. I do need help to manage that to make it easier for me. But when it comes to Lambda, I've lowered the ceiling for the complexity of what one unit of code or a module or whatever can have, which means I don't need as much help to manage the complexity, and which is the only reason why I've been happy with Node.js and doing a lot more imperative programming than I like to admit nowadays. So sadly, I don't think they matter quite as much anymore, at least not with Lambda. With serverless, I think more and more the important thing is not so much what you write in your code, it's understanding your architecture components, how they work with each other, how Lambda works with SQS or SNS, and how does Kinesis fit into your picture, your architecture compared to SNS or SQS or EventBridge. Those becomes more important questions to answer and understand than what is this line of code better than the other.
Great.
Nice. It's all responsibilities working together.
Great. Nice. I'll call you back. So it's nice to talk about like this level of code. This is how do you share your code? Like you use layers, or you just put the whole code together like a monorepo? How is it happening?
I guess it depends whether or not to use monorepo or micro repos. I think that's the name for one repo per
Shared repo. Yeah.
So I think it depends on the company. The bigger the company, the more difficult it is to actually do monorepo well. The more you need to invest into tooling. So for a lot of smaller teams I work with, I use monorepo. I'm very happily. But for bigger teams, we have more clear defined boundaries or responsibilities and deployment cycles. I use micro repos, and dependencies or shared libraries have got their own npm package and deployment cycle, so that teams can decide when they want to release a new version and use new version of the shared library. As for layers, I don't use it very often. It has very limited use case. And also layers has got additional complexities. So if I want to run some tests locally, invoking the function locally before I deploy them to AWS and run end-to-end tests, well, my Jest doesn't know what is a layer. I mean, what's this layer thing that you're talking about? I'm just trying to run your code locally. So it involves additional complexities for managing your layers, and also when you update your layers, you have to do a deployment as well. But the layers is useful when you've got things like large dependencies that doesn't change often, but you don't want to upload them every single time. In fact, I think if you're going to use layers to cut down the deployment package size, a better thing to do would be to use something like Webpack for Node.js, where you do the bundling instead. That has got a bigger impact on both the cold start performance as well as the package size for your uploads. Layers is something that I use very, very sparingly for very specific problems that I have.
Great. So tell a little bit about your production-ready serverless course.
Yeah, so I'm starting an online course called Production Ready Serverless, based on the video course I published with Manning. But the Manning course is quite a few years old now, and it's basically just impossible to re-record everything every year because things change so quickly. So what I've done is I've turned the basic material, I've expanded that, and I'm running them as like a recurring online workshop, whereby if you go to homeschool.dev, you can sign up to the one starting in September, whereby we will do 4 weeks, and then every week we will release new lessons and exercise, and then you will work on it yourself, but you would talk to other people, including myself, on our Discord channel. And then the following Monday, we will have 2 live Q&A sessions. So it's a mix between those traditional video courses where there's no interaction with the instructor, and instructor-led workshops where it's like 2 days. You have to put away everything else and just work on the workshop. So it's a mix of the two, so that you get that self-paced study, but also working with other people and also getting feedback from the instructor as well.
Nice. For those who don't know, we have the link here in the description, so just click there. And Yan has a newsletter too, I've seen. So you can receive all news from there, I suppose. Great, great. So I'm going to invite the next guest here. So Alvaro. Oh, let's come up. Yeah.
Hey, Alvaro.
Hi there. Nice to meet you. Well, you talk a lot about cost and this kind of stuff that we need to be aware of using AWS Lambdas. But tell me about some horror story that you know or that you experience with this kind of application, that at the end of the month you turn Bezos a little more rich because a error or something like this.
I've seen a few blog posts where people post where they had a big bill at the end of the month. One example was someone posted something on the Hacker News, and I think he had like a $10,000 bill at the end of the month because he was using API Gateway on an API that was doing a couple of thousand requests per second. So he got a lot of feedback that he should have used ALB, which would have cut his cost by 90%. But those are the sort of mistake that is really easy to make unless you look at your traffic. As we mentioned earlier with Eric, you have to understand your traffic. And the great thing about a lot of service technologies is that you can work out based on your traffic what it's going to cost you. I can have a pretty accurate estimate based on the fact that API Gateway costs you $3.5 per million requests, and the Lambda costs you 50 cents per million invocations for 128 meg function. I can work out based on my current request per second. I'm going to do, say, 500 million requests per month. How much is that going to cost me on API Gateway? So if I know to look at that, I can then say, well, that's stupid. that's like 20 grand. So maybe not API Gateway in that case. I should use ALB.
Sure.
But of course, go on.
Yeah, but however, if you do some human mistake, as myself did, I put the visibility timeout, not myself, but some of my customers put the visibility timeout on the SQS with 0. So it just keep like scheduling new sessions. Yeah, so
there's also S3 Lambda recursion. Especially with S3, you put a file into S3, you process the Lambda function, and then you put it back into S3, maybe in another folder, and then that triggers again. So, but you're talking about those are sort of things that are really quite easy to make mistakes. But however, you could set up a lot of monitoring around AWS. There's a billing alerts. You always should have billing alerts. And then there's also other things you should set in terms of for Lambda, for example. I've actually built some tools that allows you to track the number of invocations on a call chain, so that if you start to get the same if the chain becomes bigger than say 10, we just stop the invocation because you probably have recursion. There's still different things you could do to help you catch that. But again, you need to understand the tool that you're working with and what you can do to do that. If you don't know to work out your cost projection, well, it's probably going to hurt you. There are other tools that's out there now that can do a lot better job in terms of alerting when your cost profile changes. Things like Cloud Zero does a pretty good job of that in terms of showing you your cost changes by service, from 1 month to another. But again, you need to know, what tools are available. Is part of that is about learning, unfortunately. But the biggest cost horror story I've heard, actually two of them. One is with CloudWatch custom metrics. CloudWatch counts metrics, a unique metric as a combination of different dimensions. I heard one company, they put the request ID as a dimension, which means every single request is a unique metric, which is 30 cents per month, which is a lot of money at the end of the month. So that was a horror story. Another horror story was a company, I think they were a client of Corey Queen, where they were sending, I don't know how much data, but a lot of data through Net Gateway. Net Gateway charges you based on gigabytes per process in and out. So that gets really expensive when you're sending, say, 100 terabytes per day out of your Net Gateway. But if you're using a Net instance, which you can buy, auto-scaled, you can buy the services from AWS Marketplace, which will reduce that cost to, I don't know, $500. Basically, just run a couple of these two instances to be your net. So those are the sort of things that if you don't look out for them, they can be really expensive. There's a lot of cost mistakes that can happen with VPCs. VPC endpoints, just Net Gateway itself. Those are things that can hurt you really badly if you're not careful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
No worries.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Alvaro. Thank you. So talking, because we know we are humans and we commit some mistakes. So have you ever committed some big mistake, like dropping tables or like spending a lot of money?
Not me, man. I don't make mistakes. But honestly, I did when I really early in my career. I was working for an investment bank, Credit Suisse. I dropped our staging database.
And they like notice like after a while or just in time?
No, people noticed right away. They just didn't know it was me.
Like they know now that you are watching.
yeah. Now they know. But at the time, they had really poor monitoring. There's one user for everybody in the team, so they don't know who dropped the table.
Jesus. And about your masters,
I wasn't going to tell them.
And about your masters, how was it happen? Like I've been thinking to make a master, like to travel abroad, study like abroad, but how was the experience for you?
It was okay, I guess. The reason why I did a master's straight away is because so in the UK, at least before when I was doing when I went to university, if your family income was below a certain level, the government pay for your tuition fee. So if I did the degree first, a bachelor, and then do a master, then the master will count as a higher education, which I will have to pay myself. But if I did a 4-year master's in one go, then the whole thing was covered as part of my college education, which is why my family didn't have a lot of money. So it made sense for me to go and do the master's straight away rather than doing a bachelor first.
Great, this is nice. This is the same here. And how the masters helps you in your current position?
Probably doesn't.
Yeah.
The thing with universities is that there's a lot of things I learned that I was taught at university. I didn't appreciate them until much later because a lot of them is all theories. I had no practical need for them. So after I've been working for a few years, then I start to realize, oh, right, that thing I learned at school and in uni, that was really useful. That was really interesting. Like compilers, after I've been working for maybe 6-7 years, I was really interested in compilers, how they work. But when I was in university, it means nothing to me. So I would say a lot of stuff that I learned at university were probably too theory heavy, and I didn't appreciate the importance of them, and I didn't find them interesting either. but it was nonetheless another year in the university, another year of enjoying student life, so it wasn't bad.
Sure. And by the way, you got a prize. So was this, like computational theory 3 prize?
So that was just one of the modules from my degree, and it was actually a module that was sponsored by Credit Suisse, and I won the award as the top of the year, as the top of my year. And then I got an internship with Credit Suisse that year, which is quite nice. And that's how I got my first job after the internship.
Oh, great. So I am a consultant here as well. Now, I know we have a lot of problems that is not related to tech. There's people problems. And for you, what is the hardest part of being a consultant?
The hardest part is probably not having teammates, I would say. It can be very lonely. I have a lot of clients I talk to regularly, but not people that I work with every day that you consider, friends or comrades, people that you work side by side every day. That creates a much stronger bond, which I miss. I don't have anyone like that now. That's probably the hardest part. Besides that, it's the fact that you have, instead of one job, you have maybe 10. You have to do your own marketing, you have to do your own accounting, booking your travels, and actually doing the work, and the contract negotiations, and the reading contracts, legal documents, and booking, and you have a lot of different jobs you got to do. That's also quite difficult as well.
Sure. And even though with this whole things going on, you actually wrote a book. So tell us a little bit about your book.
It's still work in progress, and
nice.
I didn't write it by myself. So the book is called the Serverless Architecture on AWS, the second edition. It was, the first edition was written by Peter Sparsky, who was I think he's the head of content at Cloud Guru. So he started the second edition, but he needed help, so he asked me to join his team, and so I'm a co-author on that book. It's still work in progress, and I think we just about to publish another couple of chapters, but it's in the Manning's early access program. So whenever we finish a couple of chapters, we release them straight away. But yeah, it takes time. It's hard work.
Sure. I gave up from a book. I was writing like a serverless in practice for a package.
Right.
So so here I was super busy. I was like, man, I cannot do with that because there's a lot of effort involved.
It's better to have a co-author. Share the burden.
For sure. And you work as an advocate, a developer advocate. So how is it going there too?
So I work with Lumigo, I guess as a contract developer advocate. So they are one of my biggest clients. I do maybe 2 or 3 days of work with them per week. And as a developer advocate, I do a lot of work with them in terms of content, writing blog posts for them, also represent them in the public as a speaker at conferences, running webinars and workshops and things like that. It's interesting. It's also, I guess it's also kind of tough for me because I have to wear different hats. Sometimes as a developer advocate for Lumigo, sometimes as an independent consultant. So it's a balance I have to manage at all times.
Yeah, I mean, you have to organize and handle your time as better as possible. Otherwise, you can get our thing like mixed.
Yes,
Great. Yeah. So you're working like a consultant, but have you ever thought about building your own product?
Not really. Building a product company is really hard work and is really likely to fail. So it's much easier to work as a consultant, helping other people build their product than to build your own company. Not really. I don't want that stress.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It would be hard. And about the technologies, because how long have you been a programmer?
About 15 years.
15 years. So what you are wondering for the future?
For the future, no, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything in the future, but there's certainly a lot of things right now which I find interesting. All the serverless stuff that's happening, also a lot of so maybe some of the machine learning and the chat. I think a chat is a very interesting thing. I like to explore a bit more when I have time, which is probably never.
Do you think in the future everything would be only serverless?
I don't think that will ever happen because that just never happens. We still have things running on COBOL. I mean, we still have things running on Fortran. Technology just don't go away. We, as industry, our technology we branch some more. Nothing ever goes away. Never, ever, and nothing ever becomes the one and only, because there's just too many different use cases, too many different requirements. And I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Sure. And your Serverless Award hero is AWS Serverless Hero Award. Yeah, how it happened? Because I've seen just a very few people have it.
So AWS every quarter they have internal teams would recommend people based on their contributions and whatnot, and then they will pick a few people to join the Heroes program, which is basically the equivalent to Microsoft's MVP program. I think Google has got a similar thing as well, Google Cloud experts and things like that. It's a recognition for people that are contributing to the community.
Great, nice. And what do you do in your free time? Because I've seen there is only a few free time there. But what do you do in the free time?
Writing blog posts, writing code. I don't really have a hobby besides like coding. I guess I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of superhero TV series and things like that. But other than that, I don't have like a interesting hobby.
Great. Yeah. And I've seen your nickname is the Burning Monk. Why is it?
Do you know Rage Against the Machine?
Yeah, sure.
Their debut album is the...
Yeah.
That's right. So when I was growing up, the Rage Against the Machine was my favorite band. So when I decided to pick a nickname for email or whatnot, I decided to go with the Burning Monk, and it's become my I guess online alias.
Great. I actually tried on my high school, but I figured with Crazy Boy, I was like, no, it's not cool at all. I just move around, yeah. And this is actually a lot of people keep asking this. What is your dream, your life dream?
Don't have any big live stream. I just want to, have reach financial security, and then be able to not do things that I don't like doing.
Great.
Like picking work or working for projects that I don't enjoy. I want to minimize that if I can, and just have a relatively stress-free life. That would be pretty good.
Great. Have you ever thought about being like a nomad, like traveling a lot and just...
Probably not. I like to stay in the. I like to traveling, but not all the time. As a consultant, as you understand, we travel a lot, and that was one thing that I didn't like. Spending a lot of time away from home, and a lot of time traveling. It's tiring. It's not a great time. It's not a great way to spend my time. So now that I don't travel, it's actually quite nice to be at home.
Great. So I'm gonna invite all our guests right here. Alvaro is there. Oh, who else is there? Let me see if Alvaro is there. Yeah. So thank you so much for all of you for being here. I really hope you like it. This for more ones, and I would like you to say some message. What do you think about this whole life? So it could be like first Alvaro and then Wells.
Right.
Well,
Bate-papo.
need to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ian. And I learned a lot about AWS Serverless today. And it's always nice to have a lot of content, a lot of content makers about this theme and another theme. I like very much to share as much as I can, and I really admire people like you too, that share a lot of content in the world. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
For me, basically, after the Race Against the Machine, I don't even know what to say. I was just watching the live and thinking, oh my gosh, Yan always has awesome answers for everything. And then Eric answered about and then Eric questioned him about the the nickname, and the answer, no, Rage Against the Machine, there's an album, and I was like,
Nice. I have to same myself here. Yeah.
amazing. That's an awesome opportunity to be right here. So
Great.
it's a pleasure to know you, Yan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I start to oh my gosh, I forgot how to say. If I start to thank you right now, I would. I would thank you when I
Okay, no problem.
going away. I forgot a lot of words right there. So
No problem. Yeah. And Ian, thank you so much again for your time. Alvaro actually had a very good idea to like extract the audio from here and put some on my podcast, or even cut some pieces where you have some interesting answers to share to people. Because I know sometimes like an hour long is hard to get the specific and good part. So I'm not promising, but I'm gonna try to do it.
Sounds
So
good, man.
yeah, sure. So your last message for who's still watching you right now.
Yeah, I guess my final message would be to keep learning and keep experimenting. And I think one of the things that has really helped my career is I started writing. I started sharing everything I learned. That has helped my career a massive amount. I think you should do the same. When you're writing, when you're sharing, you're not only forcing yourself to learn better and learn more deeply, but you're also helping create connections. Like people like Eric read about me from my Medium blog posts and whatnot. You create a network effect, which would definitely benefit you, especially in the long run. So keep learning, keep sharing. But yeah.
Great. So thank you so much for all of you who's watching right now. Follow him, follow Ian here. We have the description with the link, all of the data right there. And please share this video with your friends, because I know it will be important for those who's still working with Lambda, and actually for those who's still struggling with Lambda and serverless apps. So I'm going to see you on the next week, the same time next week, the same channel. And thank you so much again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.